But let's take a look at some numbers that are coming from another election observer group. That's the Coalition of Election Monitoring and Observation in Tanzania. They collected this data from 6,444 observers. So let's look at some of the questions they asked. And we'd hesitate that these questions were asked, say at around noon and halfway through polling day today. So the situation may have changed somewhat across the day. So these are just some of the questions to gauge on today. This was the question they asked. Were there political party polling agents at your polling station? Remember, they're supposed to monitor how the election is going. For the supporters of CCM, 98% of them said yes, they were present. It comes to 675 who said yes. For Ukawa, that's the opposition coalition, it was 6,351. Others, it was about 4,585. So all in all, you can see a very positive feeling of those who voted and those who were polled after that about presence of polling agents at the various polling stations. I want to move to the next issue now, and which was about voting materials that were missing. Remember, that happened in certain areas, which John Alanamo asked former Vice President Moody Awori about. Like they said, largely this was something that was very small. 10% of them said yes. In certain areas, the polling stations were missing. And we do hear that the National Electoral Commission in Tanzania has postponed voting in some polling stations to tomorrow. 5,921, that's about 90% of those that were polled there, saying that the voting materials were present, both for the ward, parliamentary, and presidential seats, or rather for all of them that were there, that were present. And we will be speaking, of course, to those there. I believe we have another question that we went into. Yeah, was your polling station together? 85% said no, so showing that voters in Tanzania had a relatively easy time finding the voters register and finding their names in the register as well, with just 18%. That's 1,208 of those respondents saying yes, the voters register was missing. So you can see largely, and these are from voters who went and actually cast their ballots out of the 22.7 million voters. Now this, of course, is just a sample. And in just a moment, we will be speaking to Dr. Lupa Ramadhani, and he's from this Coalition for Election Monitoring and Observation in Tanzania, to just get a feel also of some of the numbers there. But I believe we have two more. Yeah, so let's take a look at those. Yes. What time? Oh, this is an important one. How could I forget this one? What time did voting begin at your polling station? 94% said polling opened quite early, between 7 and 7:30, with just 4% saying that polling stations opened by 8 p.m. and about 2% saying it was from 8 p.m. onwards. Remember, there was that region that we talked about, and Ben Kitili was there talking about the polling station opening at 8 o'clock. Hours into that, the president. After that, by around 3 o'clock, there were no ballot papers in that region. And finally, how many polling officials were present? Between 1 and 5, 73% said so. Between 5 and 10, that number goes down. And of course, more than 11, that's 4%. And we just want to remind you at this point that the rules in Tanzania are that no polling station should have more than 450 voters assigned to it, just to make the election process really fast. Though there were some reports in some areas, according to Chadema earlier today, that some polling stations had up to 800, if not more, registered voters, of course making the process quite tedious. Like I said, we'll be speaking to Dr. Lupa Ramadhani from the Coalition of Election Monitoring and Observation in Tanzania, as well as Victor Rateng from Toweza, East Africa. Remember, they're the ones who gave us that poll.